Okay. Does everybody know where we're at? In the Bible? Yes, we're on Hebrews 10. But as always, we'll go through 9, and these are kind of long, so I'll move a little bit faster. With 9 anyway. Hebrews 9. So then verily the first covenant had also ordinances of divine service and worldly sanctuary. So what we've been talking about here is the changing over of the covenant and why it was important to the Hebrews at this time and why, some were still on the fence about it all. And this is just them going through explaining how this is the fulfillment of the promise, of a better promise, and the changing from one covenant to the old. So then verily the first covenant had also ordinances of divine service and a worldly sanctuary. For there was a tabernacle made, the first, wherein was the candlestick, as you see there, and the table and the showbread, which is called the sanctuary. And after the second veil, there's a big veil hanging up that you couldn't go in the second part, the tabernacle, which is called the holiest of all, which had the golden censer and the ark of the covenant overlaid round about with gold, wherein was the golden pot that had manna, and Aaron's rod that budded, and the tables of the covenant. And over it the cherubims of glory, shadowing the mercy seat, which we cannot speak now particularly. So in this ark of the covenant, that was in the holiest of holies, they called it, that was beyond the veil that they had hanging up, was the pot with manna, a rod, and the stones that the Ten Commandments were written on that Moses brought down. So as for the lid, which is called the mercy seat, but we would call it a lid in our language and what it is, it had 2 cherubims. But the reason they cannot speak particularly about it now, I think anyway, or what was going on, because the covenant, or the Ark of the Covenant was lost at this time. They didn't have it anymore. I don't know where it was. I don't know where it is. Indiana Jones apparently found it in that one movie, but I don't believe so. So it's kind of lost to history and lost somewhere, although I'm sure somebody has it somewhere, probably in the Vatican or something weird. But cherubims sitting on top. Now, what is a cherubim? It's kind of a heavenly being or an angel. Not exactly an angel, but close. But it had 2 of them over top. If you hear how cherubims are explained in the Bible, though, you see them all with the wings, and they look like the angels coming down over it, kind of shielding, protecting it. But cherubims explained biblically look a whole lot different. They have like the head of a lion, a man, and a bull. They have a lot of wings with rings floating around them and all this different stuff. Pretty intense things. So I don't know exactly how you would make golden cherubims as they were explained. So I don't really know particularly, and no one else does either, what they look like on top of that. But as for the temple, so first you had the sheets round about it, so nobody could go in. You weren't allowed into the temple. When you had this first area here, you would bring the priests the sacrifices. They would come get them, sacrifice them at the altar outside. And then inside the actual tabernacle or temple was that first room. It had all the candlesticks, showbread, table, and the altar of incense. And then through the curtain, you have the Ark of the Covenant that was sitting there. That's kind of how it was laid out. Now, when these things were thus ordained, the priest went always into the first tabernacle, accomplishing the service of God. So they would go into the first room, and that's where they would kind of make some of the sacrifices, not the big animals burning up, or it would set the place on fire and burn it down, so they did that outside. But that's where they would make the prayer and the sacrifices for different things. But into the second went the high priest alone once every year. So where he would go into the actual, through the veil, the first priest was, the high priest would, and he would go once every year, not without blood, which he offered for himself and for the errors of the people. So once a year, they would take the sacrifices and sprinkle the Ark of the Covenant with blood. That would be the sacrifices for the errors, for the sins of all the people. The Holy Ghost is signifying that the way into the holiest of all was not yet made manifest, while as the first tabernacle was yet standing. So they did that so God would have a place to dwell, or they would just signify God is with our people. He is in this holiest of holies. We go make sacrifices to him once every year. But after Jesus died and all that stuff happened, it showed that that practice was not the way through to the holiest of holies. That was not necessarily the end game on how to get into the holiest place, which was a figure for the time then present, in which were offered both gifts and sacrifices that could not make him that did the service perfect as pertaining to the conscience. So you can do all these sacrifices, you can sacrifice animals, but does that help you? Does that absolve you of your sin? Does that make you feel better about all the sin you've done and the wrong you've done to God? They would argue here, no, which stood only in meats and drinks and divers washings, and cardinal ordinances imposed on them until the time of Reformation, which is now, which is what brought Hebrews about. But Christ, being come and high priest of good things to come, by a greater and more perfect tabernacle, not made with hands, that is to say, not of this building. He brought in a different high priesthood with a different tabernacle that wasn't something like we're in right now. It wasn't necessarily a place. It wasn't tangible, you would call it. Neither by the blood of goats and calves, but by his own blood, he entered in once into the holy place, having obtained eternal redemption for us. He doesn't have to keep coming back and coming back and coming back anymore to do these sacrifices. He sacrificed himself once, making everything all that perfect. No amount of blood, cows, goats, chickens, everything else they sacrificed there would amount to one drop of the blood of Jesus. So once he did that, what sacrifice can you give that's better than that? There is none, so checkmate on all the sacrificing stuff. That's why you don't do sacrifices anymore. We don't, anyway. For if the blood of bulls and goats and the ashes of a heifer sprinkling the unclean sanctify to the purifying of the flesh, how much more shall the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without spot to God, purge your conscience from the dead works to serve the living God? Kind of what we just talked about. If Christ did it and he used his blood, what other blood could you offer that could purge your consciousness from that? And for this cause he is the mediator of the New Testament. So now it is called the New Testament. Does everybody remember the difference between testament and testimony? No? You're on the right track, yeah. A testimony is something you can say that happened. A testament is something that is proven to be happened. So if you go to court and you give your testimony, well, it couldn't have been me, I was here doing that. That's your testimony. But if you have a testament, that is, yes, he said this and we have proved that through there. So now you have the New Testament proven through all these works, through all that. Yeah, you're closer than anybody else in here was. So, for the redemption of the transgressions that were under the first testament, they which are called might receive the promise of eternal inheritance. So, in order to get the inheritance promised to you now, Jesus made that way, in my opinion, quite a bit easier, because now you believe on Jesus, you have faith, you go through mercy, you go through grace, we'll say, that's the term used the most from that, not to follow all these different laws, that you wouldn't have known sin unless there were laws against that. For where a testament is, there must also of necessity be the death of the testator. That's when it gets sealed. That's when it's perfect. All the prophets, or the majority of the prophets, they didn't write a book and go around giving it to everybody while they were alive. It was only after they were dead did everybody like, oh, that was right. This guy said all this would happen and now it has. So you give the testament of that. For a testament is of force after men are dead. Otherwise, it is of no strength at all while the testator liveth. Which is why Jesus had to come and die to bring in the New Testament. Whereupon neither the First Testament was dedicated without blood. Even the New Testament had to be dedicated with blood. The blood of Jesus instead of the blood of sacrifices from the Old Testament, where they were sacrificing for God with the sheep in Egypt, or the lamb, firstborn lamb, and all that they were going around doing for there. For when Moses had spoken every precept to the people according to the law, he took the blood of calves and goats with water and scarlet wool and hyssop, and sprinkled both the book and all the people. Well, if we did that here, I just got a big bowl of blood, some branches or something like that, and I'll dip it in. It's kind of weird, right? But that's how the Old Testament was sanctified. It was sanctified through the blood that they had after Moses came off the mountain, and they had set forth a new path for them to follow, saying, "This is the blood of the testament which God hath enjoined unto you." So now you are the new people. This is the new time. We got new things to do. We got new things to do as a people. We're out of Egypt now. We're out of bondage. We got a job to do for God. Moreover, he sprinkled the blood both of the tabernacle and all the vessels of the ministry. And almost all things are by the law purged with blood, and without shedding of blood is no remission. So I'm not going to get into every single one of them because I don't even know every single one of them. But usually for every sin, there was a particular sacrifice. For every purging or disease that you had, there was a particular sacrifice or ritual you had to go through to get that done, whether it be of doves, sheep, bulls for peace, sheep for, I forgot what sheep was for, rams for sins, and a couple other things, but I got it up here. We'll get to that. And almost all things are by the law purged with blood, and without shedding blood is no remission. So that's how they would ask or seek for redemption with God or forgiveness from God. It would be with their sacrifices. It was therefore necessary that the patterns of things in the heavens should be purified with these, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. So what's saying here, it was necessary that you have to give that sacrifice to it to purify it, but now that's not going to make them heavenly just because you've had sacrifices on it. In order to get to the heavenly things themselves, they need better sacrifices than these. For Christ has not entered into the holy places made with hands. You can't go sprinkle an ark and Jesus pop up. That's not really how it works anymore. So, into the holy places made with hands, which are the figures of the true, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us. So now he is in the holiest of holies. He is there to advocate on our behalf beside the Father for all of that. So he was the sacrifices. So I thought about this. Imagine the bulls and the rams that you killed as a sacrifice. They're the ones that are speaking on your behalf. Like, no, he's sorry, he killed me for it. Kind of thing. Well, in a weird sort of way, and in my mind how it works, that's kind of what Jesus is there for. Like, they killed me for this, but those after the testament, which is why I had to die first, had faith on that. He's the one that's up there giving the advocate for it. He sacrificed himself for us so he could advocate for us. I know it's weird to think about it like that, but that's what happened. Nor yet that he should offer himself often. He doesn't have to be crucified yearly. He doesn't have to come back and sacrifice himself yearly. As the high priest entereth into the holy place every year with blood of others, for then must he often have suffered since the foundation of the world, but now once in the end of the world hath he appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. That's how he conquered sin, by giving the ultimate sacrifice. There's no more do this for this, do that for that. It was a one-size-fits-all thing because it was from the blood of the most holiest person that ever came. Holiest person that ever came, the Son of God. And as it is appointed unto men once to die, but after this the judgment, so Christ was once offered to bear the sins of many, and unto them that look for him shall he appear the second time without sin unto salvation. Because after that sacrifice, after he had made that, he lost the fleshly body, or sacrificed the fleshly body, and became even more perfect from that. A sinless sacrifice was offered for that. So now he will come back again sinless for us. And can you imagine looking at something or someone sinless? What exactly does sinless look like? That's why it's going to look crazy. You can draw it all day, but nobody exactly knows what it's going to look like when it comes back. But I bet we will know once we see it. We're supposed to know once we see it. But there's going to be a lot of imitators for that, so keep your guard up. Alright, Hebrews 10. Went through that kind of fast. We'll have to go through this one a little fast too, because it's still long. For the law having a shadow of good things to come, and not the very image of these things. So the sacrifices, they had all that right. Like there was something about to come through the same path. can never, with those sacrifices which they offered year by year, continually make the comers thereunto perfect. You can sacrifice every bull, every goat, every ram you have. You will still not be perfect under the law. You will still have sin from that. For then would they not have ceased to be offered, because that the worshippers once purged should have no more conscience of sin. Did they sin after they sacrificed their bulls and goats? Yes. So what did that really do for that? And even still today, they make these sacrifices over there, these weird ritualistic sacrifices. But in those sacrifices, there is a remembrance made of sin every year. So every year when they do the sacrifices, they're admitting, oh, we're sinners and we still have to do this. And they want it to be the remission for them as in the Old Covenant. For it is not possible that the blood of bulls and goats should take away sins. Yet they still do it and they still try. Because why? They were the Hebrews that didn't accept this testament that came through of the New Testament that is partaking. This one's kind of weird. Look, they stick. These are like goats and stuff, skewered on sticks, and they just throw them in a fire pit and bury it. It's kind of weird. Kind of a weird new way to sacrifice, I guess. Wherefore, when he cometh into the world, he saith, Sacrifice and offering thou wouldest not, but a body hast thou prepared me. In burnt offerings and sacrifices for sin thou hast had no pleasure. Then said I, Lo, I come, in the volume of the book it is written of me, to do thy will, O God. Where does that come from? Psalms, where about everything else comes from. So then said I, Lo, I come, in the volume of the book it is written of me, I delight to do thy will, O my God. Yea, thy law is within my heart. That's what I was saying here. The law will now be written in their hearts once you get to the New Testament of that. So sheep was the burnt offering, bull was a peace offering, goat was sin offering, and then you had the grain offering, which was the showbread that they had there. These are a few of the different offerings for that. Above, when he said, Sacrifice and offering, and burnt offerings, and offering for sin thou wouldest not, neither hast pleasure therein, which are offered by the law, then said he, Lo, I come to do thy will, O God. He taketh away the first, so that he may establish the second. Even in Psalms, it was foretold that would happen. Because of all these sacrifices, neither hast thou pleasure therein. I'm sure it was set up that way for a reason, obviously. But I don't think God necessarily loved the bulls that were being sacrificed or loved the sheep and wanted them. Like, oh, sacrifice it to me. I need it. I want it. He did it for them to learn what was to come. He did it for them for ritualistically, so they could learn sacrifice to God, so they could learn to kind of bend the knee to God when it came through that. And even still, even after Jesus came and made the perfect sacrifices, some of them wanted to stick to the old ways. Some of them still do to this day. Then said he, Lo, I come to do thy will, O God. The new one, he taketh away the first, that he may establish the second. By the which will we are sanctified through the offering of the body of Jesus Christ once for all, for everybody. And every priest standeth daily ministering and offering oftentimes the same sacrifices, which can never take away sin. So he said Jesus came and died once for all, and even still, you have priests doing the same exact sacrifice, thinking it's going to make any difference now. It will not. But this man, after he had offered one sacrifice for sins forever, sat down on the right hand of God. All the bulls and goats and rams and doves and sheep that they sacrificed before didn't get the right hand of God, to sit on the right hand of God. I don't even know where they went. I don't know really what happens to animals, if they go to heaven or not, but, you know. But this man came in the flesh, once gave his sacrifice, and now sits at the right hand of God, from henceforth expecting till his enemies be made his footstool. The footstool of that. For by one offering he hath perfected forever them that are sanctified. We don't have to sprinkle ourselves with the blood of goats and rams. We don't have to go give offerings to certain items and idols, things of blood and rams. Jesus did all that for us. That's why he came to do that. Whereof the Holy Ghost also is a witness to us, for after that he had said before, This is the covenant that I will make with them after those days. This was in Hebrews 8 already. This is why they're coming back to it. It says, see, this is further proving, saith the Lord, I will put my laws into their hearts, and in their minds will I write them, and their sins and iniquities will I remember no more. Now where remission of these is, there is no more offering for sin. Jesus came and took it away, so you don't have to kill anything else thinking it's going to remove your sin. Doesn't mean you're not going to have sin, but now a sacrifice isn't going to get it away, because you can't sacrifice anything greater than what's already been sacrifices. So through that sacrifice now is how you get forgiveness of that. Through that sacrifice is how you get purged from your consciousness that of sin. The feeling on like when you, a lot of you haven't done it, but a lot of you have, when you get saved, I imagine most of us did it the same way, you feel really weird, you feel really bad, you feel guilty of even things that you didn't even, it's not like you're sitting there remembering all the bad things you do, like, oh, I asked Mom, I feel bad for it and all that. You just feel an overall weird guilt sense. And you'll resist it. It's naturally a human response is to resist certain feelings that make you feel bad, right? But when you come up, and when you're like, all right, whatever, I'm going to the altar this time. You come this way, and then you kneel down. What happens there? Why does it all go away? Why do you not get up feeling weird anymore? Feeling bad anymore? Think of that when it says the purging of consciousness. If I felt really bad and I'm like, well, here's a bull and they killed it and threw it on a fire, I'd be like, that didn't help at all, probably. But for some reason, coming up and the kneeling of it does something differently. Even just that, just coming up in the kneel. Sometimes you don't even say anything. I don't remember saying that much at all. It was kind of weird. Everybody, most people come this way for it. I was in a Christmas place, so I was up here. I had to go around to do it, so I kind of approached it from a different direction than most people, but even still, it's a weird feeling. So the purging from the consciousness is not from offerings anymore. Having therefore, brethren, boldness to enter into the holiest by the blood of Jesus, by a new and living way which he hath consecrated for us through the veil, that is to say his flesh, and no longer the veils hanging in the temple, for when he died they were ripped in half. And having a high priest over the house of God, a high priest under the order of what? Jesus ordained forever a high priest after the order of? Yes, Melchizedek. So the new priesthood, let us draw near with a true heart, in full assurance of faith, having our hearts sprinkled from an evil conscience, and our bodies washed with pure water. Heart gets sprinkled, you come up, arise with a pure conscience, and then you get dipped and baptized in with that. Let us hold fast the profession of our faith without wavering, for he is faithful that promised. And let us consider one another to provoke unto love and to good works. So, provoke. What does it mean to necessarily to provoke?
Encourage, push, aggravate.
Yeah, to aggravate and encourage other people to do good works. Like, you should have done that, or you need to do this, that, or the other, to make them do the good works. You can be annoying as long as it's in a positive manner or for a good reason. It's biblical. Not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together.
Amen.
Amen. As the manner of some is, but exhorting one another. And so much the more as ye see that day approaching. You can feel it, can't you? I know you can. But something's just not right in the air and hasn't been for a little bit. For if we sin willfully after that we have received the knowledge of the truth, there remaineth no more sacrifice for sins. Reiterating, you can't just give a bull anymore and think everything's okay. You can't just give a sheep anymore and think things are okay. The opposite side of that fence. Before it was like, oh, you don't have to sacrifice anymore because Jesus did it for you. That's how you get forgiveness and purging of the conscience. But now it's going the other way. Like, you can't sacrifice things anymore to get rid of it. That's not how it works anymore. So now you're going to keep it until you get right. But a certain fearful looking for of judgment and fiery indignation which shall devour the adversaries. So if you continue to do this after the perfect sacrifice was given for you, there are consequences. There always were, but now it gets a little worse. He that despised Moses' law died without mercy under 2 or 3 witnesses. 2 or 3 witnesses come and say, he broke the 4th commandment. Well, guess what? you were killed. It's as easy as that. Of how much sorer punishment, suppose ye, shall he be thought worthy, who hath trodden under the foot the Son of God, and hath counted the blood of the covenant, wherewith he was sanctified, wherewith Jesus was sanctified, an unholy thing, and hath done despite unto the Spirit of grace. So now that Jesus has come and sacrificed for you, if you sin, if you don't care about the purging of the conscience, if you don't appreciate the sacrifice Jesus made for that, and you go on about like it doesn't matter, it didn't happen, it is worse for you than it would have been for those who were just killed and done with in Moses' day. Because you were sanctified with that blood, for all, it said, everyone was sanctified with it. And now you have done despite unto it, and you have trodden underfoot. It's happening. For we know him that has said, Vengeance belongeth unto me, I will recompense, saith the Lord. And again the Lord shall judge his people. It is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. But call to remembrance the former days, in which after you were illuminated, ye endured a great fight of afflictions. So being Hebrew and Jewish, I don't know if you know it, throughout history, it hasn't necessarily been easy, no matter where they went or what they did. Partly whilst ye were made a gazing stock, both by reproaches and afflictions, and partly whilst ye became companions of them that were so used. What is he talking about here? Well, in Galatians, it kind of hints on this a little bit. O foolish Galatians, who hath bewitched you, that ye should not obey the truth, before whose eyes Jesus Christ hath been evidently set forth, crucified among you? This only would I learn of you. Received ye the Spirit by the works of the law, or by the hearing of faith? What got you the Spirit that you had? Are ye so foolish? Having begun in the Spirit, are ye now made perfect by the flesh? Did the flesh make you perfect, or was it the Spirit? Have ye suffered many things in vain, if it be yet in vain? So now he's saying, remember everything you've suffered so far. Why would you give it up to just go back to the other stuff? Or why are you not believing on that which made your suffering worth it? All the sufferings that went up through that was now worth it through Jesus. But some of them didn't accept it. They didn't accept it was worth it. So now they're going through. And that's what he's talking about here. You remember you were illuminated, you suffered all these things. Why keep doing it for no end result? You see that a lot now even. But that's for another time. For ye had comparisons of me and my bonds, or compassion of me and my bonds, and took joyfully the spoiling of your goods, knowing in yourselves that ye have in heaven a better and enduring substance. So even when you were in bondage, you knew that you were still a child of God, and that one day it would be worth it for you. Cast not away therefore your confidence, which hath great recompense of reward. So even if you're suffering here, even if you're in bondage, even if nobody believes like you and they cast you out and they do all these other things to you, it doesn't matter, because this isn't the end goal anyway. The goal of the spirit or the soul in everybody isn't to get rich and famous and live a peaceful, awesome, loving life. In fact, that's the dying and decaying of the spirit. If you don't have to suffer or go out and fight for anything anymore, you're not feeding yourself. You're kind of denying yourself the natural instincts that were given to you by God to go out and go through all these things. For ye have need of patience, that after ye have done the will of God, ye might receive the promise. For yet a little while, and he that shall come will come and will not tarry. And this comes from Habakkuk, a very little mentioned book in the Old Testament. But for the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak and not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come, it will not tarry. So you're waiting on Jesus. Like, why is he not coming back yet? Why are we still suffering? Why are we still persecuted for his name? When's he going to come to avenge us? Even in the Old Testament, it warned, you need patience for this, because it is going to come. And he's telling them that. For yet a little while, and he that shall come will come and will not tarry, as is said here. Now the just shall live by faith. But if any man draw back, my soul shall have no pleasure in him. So living just, everything's good. But if you fall back and say, well, Jesus was alright, but my people for thousands of years have been doing this, so I'm going back to the sacrifices, I'm going back to the law, my soul shall have no pleasure in him. Even us, you see people get into Christianity, hit it hard, go for it, and then they'll fall back a little bit. They'll slide, they'll start missing things, they'll start not working as hard as before, and even I'm guilty of that. Don't draw back, because then his soul will have no pleasure in it. But we are not of them who draw back unto perdition. It's not us, but of them that believe to the saving of the soul. I think we would all believe in the saving of the soul. Pretty sure we're all believers in Jesus, and that was the new covenant, and we are believed and therefore sanctified by the new covenant, and not of the sacrifice of bulls and goats. Unless any of y'all are sacrificing bulls and goats on your own time, not telling anybody, which would be a little weird. But anyway, that's Hebrews 10:9. Pretty long, but
very good.
Hope I broke it down.